I'm really eager to jump into the message this morning. We've got a little bit of a series that we're going to do, and some of this was stirred in me. I guess I've been kind of meditating and reflecting on this conversation, particularly around one word, and it's the word sincere. The word sincere. By definition, well, let me pray first. That'd be good, right? That'd be a good starting point to pray. Jesus, thank you for being so gracious to extend to us an invitation always to engage you, to have relationship with you, to be in your presence. And so right now, even the most irresponsible of us in this room, help us to be responsible, to understand that we are in the presence of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the one who is sovereign, the one through whom all things were created. And so, Lord, I pray that we would not just be loosey-goosey with this, but that we would understand that we are in the presence of the Almighty. And Lord, we invite the transforming work of the Holy Spirit to do His thing in and through us, so that we can continue to walk out and work out our salvation, so we can understand your love for us, and so that we can show our love for you in the way that we live. Jesus, we ask these things in your most precious and righteous name. We also pray that for the message today, as we go through the words that were written by Peter, Lord, he was your disciple. And so he saw you firsthand. And he put some words to paper and some wisdom for us. And so, Lord, I pray that you would help us to grab a hold of what was revealed to him and let it shape our life. In Jesus' name, amen. The word sincere, we look for it all over the place. It's kind of a prerequisite. It's an unspoken expectation that we all have. Those of you that are in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, you expect or you hope for sincerity from your spouse. In the workplace, you expect there to be just basic decency from your employers, even your employees, your coworkers, an expectation of sincerity. And so that's why we get rattled when somebody lies to us, because that's an indication that they weren't sincere. Right? I mean, that's and all kinds of other words could be wrapped around this, but we yearn for and long for sincerity. I would say that, now granted, I only have 37 years and almost 11 months of life to gauge this off of, but it seems like sincerity is a rare thing to find these days. I'm not going to go on these tangents of news reports. I won't do that, but we know how the news is today. I won't venture into politics. I won't do it. There's some different conversations that we could engage in, and we can say, yes, that is void of sincerity. What's interesting as we get into this text, today what we're going to focus on is when Peter addresses his listeners. And at this point, the believers were spread all throughout the region. And this is as grassroots as it gets as far as the early church. I mean, they were spread out because they were fending for their lives. They were trying to get the message of God out there, letting them know that Jesus Christ is who he said he was, and he did what he said he did, and all of that kind of stuff. And so this is so organic, so grassroots, and so this letter is being sent out to encourage those who do believe to keep running and keep pressing in. And Peter is making note of some very specific things. And one of them is sincere love. There's a whole lot of wants that I have as far as my relationship with Christ. But as people get to know me, I'm not going to be perfect. In fact, I know my weaknesses. I know what kind of friend I can be, and I know what kind of friend I'm not. So I know my shortcomings, but through it all and in it all, I hope that after all of the things have settled down, people would say of me that I have a sincere love. Sincere means this: it's free from pretense or deceit. It's free from hypocrisy or falseness. So, in the simplest of ways to ask the question, Does your life reflect that you are free from falseness? The way you are a friend, is there falseness in the way you are a friend? Is there any deceit in the way that you're a friend? Is there any falseness in the way that you are a spouse? Is there? Because, that's the person that you live with most. And so that's your highest probability of living out some falseness. To just, I just want to cover that up. Just sweep that under the rug. At your workplace, is there any falseness? Here's a couple more. That's what it was free from, and this is what sincere is. It means genuine, real, wholehearted, heartfelt, an absence. This one was really tricky to me. Sincere is an absence of embellishment or exaggeration. An absence of embellishment or exaggeration. That's what I want my life to be. I don't want to exaggerate. Do any of y'all know somebody that can tell a good story? Do you know why it's a good story? Because it's just a little bit embellished. It's just a little bit exaggerated. I want to be sincere in my life. I want to be sincere in my relationships with others. I want to be sincere with God. Of the things that are the most foolish to me, I think it's such a foolish thing for us to think that we can be insincere with God and hide it from Him. Well, God, I really didn't mean that. Yeah, you did. That phrase that I said about that person, I really didn't mean that. You did. But you know what sarcasm is? God's like, I know what sarcasm is. There's a little bit of truth to every sarcastic statement that's made. And it's so silly to me that we think that we can outplay or outwit the one who sees all and knows all. It might work with your friendships. It might even work with your spouse, but it will never work with God. So Peter is writing this letter to this early group of believers, and it's so encouraging. I'm just going to go about it this morning with the most comfortable way that I preach. We're just going to go verse by verse and pick these things apart. And I hope that the Holy Spirit shows us this morning just how deep and rich and significant these words are for us today. We're going to start in verse 13. This is 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. Again, that's 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. It's kind of tricky to get to because it's all the little tiny books of the Bible in the back, and so you may have some difficulty thumbing through there. If you get to Hebrews, you just jump over 2 more books. That's what I normally do. I just get to Hebrews because it's one of the bigger, small books. I'm just trying to help you all out to get there. I'm going to have some key phrases on the screen, but I'm not going to have it all written out word for word, and so that's why I'm trying to help y'all. That's why I want to help y'all get to where we're at. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. It reads like this. I'm going to go through probably all the way to chapter 2, verse 3. So we got a little bit of reading to do. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus is revealed at His coming. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires that you had when you lived in ignorance or in unbelief. But just as He who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. So be holy in all you do. No pressure. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. Since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but you were redeemed with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through Him you believe in God. Through Jesus you believe in God, who raised Him from the dead and glorified Him, so that your faith and hope are in God. Jesus helps us and connects us to our Heavenly Father. Now that you've purified yourselves by obeying the truth, not simply hearing the truth, but by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. For you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring Word of God. For all people are like grass. All people. That means us. This isn't like some historical kind of thinking here. This is cross-generational, cross the scope of time. He's saying this is what was said about us. All people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And this is the word that was preached to you. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. Y'all feel encouraged at all after reading that? Good night. Well, if we didn't the first time through, we're going to be encouraged the second time through. We're going to go through verse by verse, and we're going to see how this loving Savior, and it was determined before the creation of all things that he came to be the one and for all sacrifice for us so that we could be redeemed. And not only when we've tasted, but let me rephrase that, not only when we've heard it, but when we've tasted it, and when we've ingested that truth, we step into sincere love. So let's go through this little by little. Therefore, this is verse 13. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. You know, right now we live our lives in hopeful expectation of Jesus' return. There's no other way to slice it. That's what we're doing right here, right now. The reason why there's not a week that goes by that I don't ask the question, why do we gather here? And it's not that I'm trying to figure out how to pastor. I'm just trying to figure out and land on, God, why do we get together? What is it that we need? What is it that needs to be heard? What is it that we need to get from you? And so I ask myself that question every week. And I ask myself all the different things that go on. Is this necessary? Is this slice of the morning necessary? Is this necessary? And our minds can get so just all over the place on things that we think are what life is all about. And what he's saying is, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought you. How do I want to word this? All in all, what we do, and the whole reason why we gather together to be encouraged by one another is not it's not because you love to sit in a soft, cushy chair and look at one person preaching a message. That's not it. But we come together so that we can be reminded that, hey, this isn't all that there is. There's this blink, this whisper of a life that we're living, and we've got eternity that we are being refined for. And what we're in right now just happens to be this super eclectic, super difficult, super turbulent season of life that we're enduring and going through. And while we're going through it, what we ought to be doing and what we're encouraged to do in these words right here is set your hope on the grace to be brought to you. Set your hope on the grace. Set your minds on things about Paul in Romans 12:1 and 2. Therefore, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. It's that whole thing of like just centering your thoughts, centering your heart on Christ. Period. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires that you had when you lived in ignorance. That's a pretty bold statement, and if you're new to the church and if you're new here, some of you might be appalled that there would even be a hint of a word like, so I'm sorry, so is Peter calling me stupid? Is he calling me ignorant? He's saying this. There's a way that we used to live before we knew Christ. It was a life of self-absorption. I want to get. I want to experience for me, myself, and I. I remember living that way. And a life that is lived for self is a really limited life. I'm not saying this, but Peter's saying this, that's also a life of ignorance. An ignorant life is one that thinks that I am God. My life is my destiny is my decision. My this is it's on me. That's a life of ignorance. So he encourages them, don't conform to those desires that you had when you didn't know Jesus. But just as he is holy, so you be holy. So you be holy in church. So you be holy when you want to put on a good front. Is that what he said? You be holy in all that you do. All of it. We don't take inventory of the all in our life. We don't. So be holy in all that you do. This is a daily struggle for me, especially when I'm tired. I'm not holy when I'm tired. I'm unbearable. I'm agitated. I'm grumpy. I'm not holy. And what he's saying is, just as Jesus is holy, now that you know Jesus and you know how holy he is, you know where he's from, you know what he did, you know what his life was all about, now that you believe him, you be like him. Be holy in all that you do. Did you know that there's a lot of things that are done in your mind? That's part of it. Yeah, but I didn't do them. Nah. You did in your mind. Be holy in all that you do. Thinking is doing. That's really uncomfortable for me to talk about. Y'all see Josh on the outside, but you don't know up here. And as Jimmy Fallon would say, it's a whole lot of ill. There's so much ew in my mind. I'm so thankful that we don't have screens hovering above us that just reflect and scroll through everything that we're thinking about any moment of any day. It gives me hives. Because I want to look holy to y'all. I don't want you to see the junk. Be holy in all that you do. Just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all that you do. I'm going to read through 17 through 21. This is really, really important. I'm just going to read through it again, though. Since you call on a father, there's no way that we could call on him unless we know Jesus. And so you call on a father who judges each person's work impartially. Live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. We're temporary here. We're so temporary here on this earth, yet we live as if this is all that there's going to be. I wish I was more disciplined at reading history and some of the things that have taken place throughout history. Anybody that's a person of wisdom and who wrote about it speaks to the fact that our life is but a vapor. If we understood that, we wouldn't live our life here by the standards that are consistently put in front of us. We would live by a different standard. Because we understand, we're going to get here eventually, this is eternal. So as we get into this and we let the Word of God transform our life, the transforming work that takes place is eternal. But my pursuits for stuff, the stuff is going to not last forever. It's not going to last. Live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. Why did he say that? Because there was an expectation of how to live your life in this day and age. There's also an expectation of how we are supposed to live our lives outside of these walls. There's an expectation to get what's yours and what you want. And Peter's saying, don't live like that. That's not what you're called to. That has nothing to do with eternity. Live like foreigners. Let's keep going. For you know that it was not by perishable things such as silver and gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors. Well, it's another brutal statement, y'all. He's saying, many of you who profess Christ, you're still living by the expectations of your family members. This is an ongoing thing, and the more I dive into my own life and I see how my insecurities or my attitudes and my presets, I look at the presets in my life, and there's still family hand-downs. Just because I was raised in their home, there's hand-downs that I live out today that have nothing to do with God. Now, they're not overtly sinful and evil, but they're not healthy. And I wonder how many of us in here, parents, as you're raising your kids, the Bible is clear. Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they get older, they will not depart from it. That's a good scripture. But do you know, in the mess of all of that, we're also training up dysfunctionality? And I want to be careful how I word this because I don't want to eat my own words when my own kids grow up, and I'm watching them allow God to shape and form how they're going to live out their relationship with Christ, because it might challenge me. They may go to people to bring the life of Christ to a group of people that make me feel uncomfortable. So what? In this very room right now, this first service, I wonder how many of you parents, you have placed, and they're unspoken expectations, but you've placed expectations. You think that your children ought to behave and carry out your family name values rather than this family name values. That's a problem. That's off. Even in our best efforts as parents living this out, we still need to understand that we're still human. And they're always going to be on this path of being refined and just letting Him work in us, working out our salvation. It's going to be a process, but we don't press on your kids so strongly that they can't figure out who they are in Christ because they're so busy figuring out who they are in you. And it says it right here. For you know that it was not the perishable things such as silver and gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors. That's a really bold statement. You were redeemed with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through him you believe in God. And God raised him from the dead and glorified him so that your faith and hope are in God. Now this is where it takes a turn. And he starts getting very, very specific. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth so that you have sincere love for each other. That was a long sentence. Now that you have purified yourselves not just by hearing the truth, but by obeying the truth. We don't like the word obedience because we feel like we can't be ourselves. I can't be the version of me that I want to be if I'm busy being obedient to this. When in fact what you need to understand is that you will have no clearer picture of who you are than when you apply yourself to this. I've seen students, I've seen young people fighting for and contending for this image of what they want to be like, and they're just constantly consumed about being something that they want to be. And when you observe their life, and I don't know how to say it, and it's probably going to sound rude, but they're just lost. It's clear that they're lost. They have no idea who they are. I know because I was there. Can I share something funny with y'all? I didn't know who I was when I was in high school. I didn't even really know who I was in college. I look back at those days, I'm like, dear Lord, what did Summer even see? It had to have been a vision from God of what might be in the future. Because I just look at pictures, I'm just like, oh my gosh. Seriously, Summer, what did you see? I don't get it. And those are just the pictures, never mind the things that I said. Wow. Let's go backwards into high school. I had this era where I just did not know what I was. I didn't know who I was. Within 2 years, I went through this cowboy phase. I went to this Western store. I bought a cowboy hat. I wore like solid color flannels. I would tuck them in, and I wore boots, and I went to school like that. Now, I was raised on a farm, but it wasn't a ranch. There's a difference. And my friends are like, what's up? Then there were these cool guys. I know none of my high school friends are going to watch this ever, so they're like, anyways. I just thought there's this guy named Aaron Sims, and he was a few years older than me, and he looked like this. I would use the word in my limited vocabulary, I would say suave. He just looked suave. You know, he just looked like he was straight from Italy. He had slick back hair, and he just wore the trendy clothes. I grew my hair out. I had a part down the middle. That's when Fila started coming out with their shoes. So I got some Fila shoes, some pants that were cool at that time. And so I tried to look European. I tried. But it's hard to be like size small, whatever that size is, that they're like this big around. Mine was medium. That lasted for a little bit, and I was like, you know what? I'm not Italian. I'm not suave. I think I am the antithesis of suave. Then I started listening to some rap music. Y'all, I'm from North Central Indiana, a community of 5,000 people nestled around cornfields, and I start listening to Snoop Dogg, Ice-T, Dr. Dre, and I'm listening to songs like Murder Was the Case They Gave Me in my bedroom. I'm like, yeah, what's up? And I'm just like jiving to this rap music, and I start acting and talking gangster. I never felt more myself, you know? It made no sense. But I'm trying, and I'm sure there are others. I mean, those are the main three that I can think about. I just think about being in my bedroom and just listening to Snoop Dogg. I live in Rochester, Indiana. And no idea who I was. And even when I began pursuing Christ and trying to figure out what that, I wanted to be like Jesus, but man, the models around me were just so, I don't know how to explain it without being just rude. They just weren't, there were a handful that were phenomenal. But the vast majority, the most immediate, were just, I still didn't know who I was, even though I was trying to figure out this relationship with Christ. And here's the weird thing, I was born and raised in church. I don't think I missed very many Sundays, which leads me to believe that you can show up to church. You can show up to church every day of your life, every Sunday, and still have no clue who you are as a Christian. You have no idea who you are in Christ. That's why I asked the question, what are we doing? If we're not being transformed by the power and the presence of the living God, then what are we doing here? As our life continues on, man, I just want us to look more like Jesus. I want us to love like Jesus. I want us to embrace like him. I want us to not be held back by generational family expectations, but I want you to be embraced by God's expectation for your life. I want you to be gripped by his expectations for your life. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, and this truth isn't something that passes by. That's what we just handled up there in the previous section. This redemption came by the way of something that lasts forever. And now when you hear that truth and you obey that truth, you're purified, and then you have a sincere love for each other. I would explain it this way. Every single one of you has a platform. Your platform may be as a parent. Your platform may be as a friend. You have friends. Your platform may be a boss. Some of you may be employers, managers. By platform, I mean you have relationship and not necessarily authority, but covenant. There's a relationship. That's what I mean by platform, and you have voice. How is that platform used? What do you do with it? So for parents, what do you do with the fact that you're a parent? My guess is that if you were a parent before you knew Jesus, you would parent differently now that you do. So you would treat your platform differently. So we have there's a different way that you operate in the mess of that which you've been entrusted. In my verbiage, what I see Peter doing here is he's saying there was a way and a code that you lived by. But now that you know Christ, you live by a different code. And so then everything that's been entrusted to you as a parent or a boss or a friend or a husband or wife, that what you've signed up for, what you've stepped into, all of that is different. Now that you've purified yourselves by obeying the truth, this is the reprogramming, if you will, so that you have a sincere love for each other. Again, let's be reminded that sincere means that it's Let me go back so I'm making sure I read it all right. Sincere is free from pretense or deceit, free from hypocrisy or falseness. It's being genuine and real, wholehearted. It's an absence of embellishment or exaggeration. You have a sincere love for one another. Now that you have that sincere love for one another, love each other deeply from the heart. Now, I don't speak Greek. I don't pretend to. But when it says love each other deeply, it means this. This depth, this deep part, this deep way of how we're supposed to live, that place, that depth. This is the fountain and seat of thoughts, passions, desires, appetites, affections, purposes, endeavors. So let's spell that out a little bit. Now that you've purified yourselves by obeying the truth so that you have a sincere love for one another, love each other deeply from the heart. Love one another without hidden agenda. Love one another thoughtfully. Love your enemies. Love the unlovable. Love on the other side of the aisle. Let me rephrase that one. Love those on the other side of the aisle. Y'all get what I'm saying? Love one another deeply. Love one another from the place where love originates. Love each other from the center of all physical and spiritual life. Love from the soul and mind. This is an intentional, mindful, thoughtful love. Now that you've tasted Jesus, love like that. Here's the litmus test for some people. I'm going to borrow this one because colleges do this when they're researching or just trying to get a feel for applicants that want to come to their college. Colleges, for the past several years now, go to students' Facebook pages because they can present themselves as one way on an application to a college, but their Facebook profile will lead them to a whole different world of understanding of who that person is. Let's just say that Jesus, which he does anyways, had access to your account. Don't grab your phone right now and start editing your profile. What would he think? I know this isn't anybody in here. But I wonder what he would think about statements that others make about those who are on the opposing side of what your political stance is. What would he think? Because those people that hold a different view than you are still made in the image of God. What would he think about the way that you think? There's a lot of thinks that I'm going to say in this sentence. What would Jesus think about the way you think that you were taught to think by your family? I'm not dumb. I know there's prejudice and racism still alive today. There's prejudice and racism in Lorain County. I want to pull the chair out again and help us to envision when Jesus comes to sit with us that he's not in a hurry. What would he think? What does your social media profiles reveal? What does it reveal about the people that you don't like? Do you make statements about people that you don't like? And just because you don't post about it doesn't mean that you don't think about it. And so don't think for a minute that he's not aware of what you're thinking. I hope this is as uncomfortable for you as it was for me. Because he says, if we're, I'm looking at, there are a few faces that are new to me, but the vast majority, I know you, and I know that you love Jesus. But now that you've tasted and you've encountered the truth of who Christ is, and that you would say that you are a Christian, that you believe in the living God, how do your statements reflect that truth? How does the way that you love people reflect that truth? Does it? Is there more of you that would lend itself for people to think, well, man, they say they love God, but the way they talk about others who are made in the image of God would say otherwise? I'm sure there are other litmus tests that we could go through. I just thought I would stop at the one, because I think there's a lot that can be said and revealed about us just by Facebook. If you want to go a step further, just start asking God to reveal your thoughts to yourself. God, reveal my thoughts to me. Help me see my thoughts. Because we're human, I can about bank on it that all of us have some that would make us cringe. And what Peter is doing is he's drawing out this expectation now. Now that you have tasted Christ, you need to operate differently. There needs to be a different operating system in you. So love one another deeply. In a refreshing way, the past, since being here, it's been such a life-giving thing for me in summer. Selfishly, we love pastoring. We love pastoring this body of believers. But I would say in the last 8 to 9 months, watching God reveal himself to people and then seeing countenance change. And and I don't know how he does it. I wish I could see it in the spiritual realm, what God does. Like, I don't know if it happens while you're sleeping or while you're walking somewhere. It's just like, blah, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel different. I don't know when it happens. I don't know how it happens. I just know that the presence of the living God gets just fit into people. It's like in them. And there's a light and a life in their eyes. And there's a difference in their actions and a willingness to serve others that potentially are surprised that to themselves that they're serving those people. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that person. Before I didn't. I just can't wait to see those things and how that happens. All I know is that our eyes and our life show the life and the light of Christ when we let the truth get in there. Now then he gets really practical. He goes on and he gets really practical. He puts things into perspective for us. Love one another deeply. You've been born again, not of perishable seed, but imperishable. So the change that's happening in your life, that change is an eternal change. It's not a change that's been handed down to you from your parents, because that didn't do, it did good, but it's not eternal. All people are like grass. All their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. This is the word that was preached to you. Then he gets super practical, and he says, now that you have this understanding, rid yourselves. I don't say rid often. Hannah, rid yourself of that thought. I'm going to rid ourselves of all these desserts, because that's really what my calling is, to rid the earth of desserts. Friday night, good Lord. We had some people over to our house. We had more desserts than we had the main meal, and I ate them, like a little bit of all of it, because I was ridding it. Therefore, rid yourselves. There are some necessary things that we need to get rid of. Get rid of malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. I didn't even know there was different kinds of slander, but there's different types of slander. There's a translation that I was reading. It's the New International Reader's Version. I'm loving this translation. It's great for kids, by the way. If you're trying to get your kids to read the Bible, the NIRV it's a really good translation. This is how it translates it. So get rid of every kind of evil. Stop telling lies. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Stop wanting what others have. Don't speak against each other. Puts it plainly. So rid yourselves, so we can do the emptying, but it needs to be replaced with something. And this is where I am increasingly becoming unapologetic for the simple way that I approach life. I used to feel like I just wasn't, smart or something. There's just some conversations that I don't find myself jumping into, like investing. I don't know. There's just some grown-up conversations that I just don't leap into. I just don't, because it doesn't naturally compute in my brain. He goes on and says this, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk. I just put crave pure. Crave what's pure. Crave what's pure in relationships. Crave what's pure as an employee, as an employer. Crave what's pure. You can't crave what's pure in those practical areas unless you are just guzzling pure spiritual food. And then by it, you may grow up. We could just put a period right there. Drink and crave what's pure, then you can grow up. Then you can grow up in your salvation. What does growing up in your salvation look like? It means you have no prejudices. You have no racism. You have nothing holding you back from giving the love of God to others. That is what being a grown-up looks like. So stop being young in our faith. I want to be like a baby, crave what's pure, but I want to be grown up in my faith. And he ends by saying, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. Grab the connection card. The question Leslie Klingenmeyer helped me out with this week, super practical. How can you be sincere? Let me flip it over here. How can you demonstrate sincere love this week? Some of y'all, maybe you need to start with your spouse. Some of you, maybe you need to start with your coworkers. Maybe it's your children that you need to demonstrate sincere love. But write down, how will you demonstrate sincere love this week? Sincere. No hidden agenda. It's completely pure.